Good morning, everybody. I'm Tom Frazer. I'm the state's chief science officer. I'm a professor and soon to be the dean of the College of Marine Sciences at the University of South Florida. So I'm excited about that, but that's not why we're here today. We're here to talk a little bit about corals, and I just want to thank everybody for joining in. We've got a great group of panelists today. We've got Secretary Noah Valenstein from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. We've got Joanna Walshak, who's the Regional Administrator for the Department's Office of Resilience and Coastal Protection. Gil McRae, who's the Director of the Florida Fish and Wildlife Research Institute. Sarah Fangman, who's the Superintendent of the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. And Jim Ritterhoff, the Executive Director and co-founder of Force Blue. So thanks you guys for being here. Again, one of the things that we're going to do today is we're going to discuss, in my view, one of the most important and timely environmental issues facing our state. That's coastal resiliency. And we're going to focus specifically on coral reef conservation and how those conservation efforts actually bear on this resiliency. And so I'm going to start by asking each of our panelists to share a little bit about themselves, their roles in their respective organizations, and how those roles relate to coastal resiliency and coral reef conservation efforts. So I'll go through each one of those guys. So I'll start off with Noah.
Sure, thanks, Tom. So my name's Noah Valenstein. I've got the privilege of being the Secretary for the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Had the honor of serving the current governor and the last governor in this role and working with an amazing team of folks. It's great to be on a webinar where everyone's wearing Columbia shirts and really enjoying what they do in life and having a goal that we all can get behind and really be passionate about. And I think that's the thing to know about public service in Florida for the environment. I went to what's Tom's current alma mater, soon not to be. So congratulate Tom on his move to USF and his new position as dean down there for marine sciences. We really enjoy having him on board as our chief science officer for DEP in the state. And I'd say that's really our focus, is protecting the environment that really drives everything here in Florida. When something goes wrong with the environment in Florida, everyone knows. You see it in the economy, you see it in our way of life. It has an impact on everyone, and it does not take long to see that and be reminded about it. Certainly, I was on a conference call yesterday about the 10th anniversary for the BP oil spill, and it just reminds you how quickly an impact can cascade across an entire system and how important our resources are. So with that, just excited to be in the conversation today. Great to join everyone on the call. And resilience and coral is an incredibly important issue here in Florida, something we don't talk about enough. And so thanks for letting us be part of ICAST and talk about it here.
Thanks, Noah. Appreciate those comments. And Joanna?
Thanks, Tom. Good morning, everybody. My name is Joanna Walczak. I also have the privilege of working within the Department of Environmental Protection within the Office of Resilience and Coastal Protection down here in the southeast part of the state. I'm actually based in Miami. And I ultimately get to oversee all of the programs we have here down working on resource management issues associated with our estuaries, aquatic preserves, and of course, Florida's coral reef. I'm also the state's point of contact for all coral reef issues. And so that means that I play a national level role as well as a state level role in making sure that I'm a conduit of information to and from those levels to the managers here on the ground that we're working holistically to manage Florida's coral reef and associated ecosystems.
All right, thanks, Joanna. So Gil, you're up.
Well, thank you, Tom. Good morning, everyone. It's good to virtually be here today. So I'm Gil McRae. As Tom said, I'm with the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, director of its research division, which is housed within the Fish and Wildlife Research Institute. We have a broad mission. Just about everything you can think of that swims, flies, slithers, or crawls falls under our purview. But for the purposes of today, I'm going to bring our experience and recent activities associated with corals. And we've been running a coral research and monitoring program for several decades now. In fact, we've maintained a monitoring program that has monitored the lower half of the Keys for over 25 years. So unfortunately, during that time, we've seen largely a degradation of that resource and the fisheries and other organisms that the reef supports. So today is about looking forward and talking about where we are and what we and our partners are doing to improve the situation and respond to the latest challenge. So good to be here.
Thanks, Gil. Sarah?
Morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Fangman. I am the superintendent of the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, which is housed within the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. I have been with NOAA for over 20 years. Started my career in the National Marine Fisheries Service way on the other side of the country up in Seattle, and have worked for sanctuaries for quite some time on the West Coast, East Coast, and came down here to Key West, which is where I am seeing you from. And in 2017, so I've been the superintendent for several years. Sanctuary encompasses 3,800 square miles of the reef tract in Florida. So I work very closely with the state to try to help address the issues and protect these resources. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with everyone today. Wish we could be together, but this will have to do.
Yeah, it will have to do, and I agree with you. I wish that we could all be together as well. So sometime in the near future. So last but not least, Jim, take it away.
Thanks, Tom. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jim Ritterhoff. I'm the executive director and co-founder of Force Blue, which, if you're not familiar, is a nonprofit organization that retrains and redeploys former special operations veterans, military-trained combat divers to work alongside scientists on marine conservation missions. And while I'm coming to you today from Montauk, New York, we've actually been very active in the state since Hurricane Irma in 2017, working on a number of missions along Florida's coral reef. And we really see Florida as ground zero in the fight to save coral reefs everywhere. So that's where the battle is. That's where our team wants to be. And I think the other factor we can bring is a lot of attention. Our story's unique. The pairing of SEALs and scientists is kind of new for the world. So hopefully we're able to amplify this very important story and let everyone know that, you know, as Florida goes, so goes the world. And that's really important to us.
All right. Well, thanks, Jim. And like I said, what a great panel. A lot of expertise here, a lot of really good insight. And so just for people that are out there listening right now, the format of the panel today is really a facilitated panel member question and answer with a discussion. And then that'll be followed then by some questions by the audience. So we look forward to your participation. Again, public participation in all of these events is critical moving forward. So that's super important. Just a little housekeeping here. So for all the panel attendees, you will need to submit your questions via the chat function. Those questions can be submitted at any time during this panel discussion. They will be compiled and submitted to me to facilitate a response following our panel discussion today. So because those questions will be addressed outside of the context of the real-time discussion, please make sure, if you can, to provide as much information or make them as clear and concise as possible. That would be really helpful. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. And I'm just going to start with a big picture, you know, and I think, Noah, you alluded to it in your opening comments. But you might, again, why are coral reefs so important to Florida?
Sure, and I think this is something that folks who come to ICAST and participate in are aware of how important our natural resources are. We sort of talked about talking that. I think everyone in our introductions touched on that a little bit. And one of the reasons I'm so glad that ICAST, the American Sports Fishing Association, you know, really tackled this and went forward and had a virtual ICAST this year. I know that's a difficult undertaking. But I can't tell you how critically important it is to get together as an industry, not only for the sake of your industry, but from the viewpoint of agencies like ours and nonprofits here, to have folks that so clearly understand the importance of natural resources come together, be passionate about it, and talk about it is a huge driver for progress for us at agencies. So I'll mention, certainly you're aware, 3.2 million visitors a year to Florida's Coral Reef Tract, more than $6 billion a year in economic impact. And when you're looking at Florida, one of the reasons I cast this here, we're the capital of recreational fishing, largest recreational fishing industry in the US, second largest commercial. When you look at the GDP for Florida, we have over $1 trillion gross domestic product here in the state of Florida. That makes us fourth largest state in the US. That makes us the 17th largest GDP in the world when you're looking at countries. So we could stand on our own as far as economic output. And I mention that because here in Florida, the outdoor recreational industry is not just a little blip in our GDP. It's almost 5% of our GDP. It is a real monster economy that really sets our economic progress here in Florida and who we are as a state. And so then you can quickly understand when you have a natural resource challenge, how drastic an impact it has on our economy and way of life here. Certainly down in Sarah's neck of the woods and where Jim normally is down in the Keys, you realize that more than half the folks there have a job related to the marine ecosystem. One of the reasons in our current COVID response, when you get to see a picture of mixture of offices and living rooms here on this chat for COVID, it was one of the reasons that as we started coming up with a plan to maintain our park system in Florida in a really safe manner so that people could still get out to our parks but do it safely. One of the first things we did was open boat ramps. We really worked to set up a safety protocol to reopen those, do it safely, but to make sure that we could allow people to get back out there and recreate because of how key that is for our economy. And so our coral reef system, supports more than 500 species of fish, more than 43 species of reef building corals, thousands of other species. It really drives the industry that we're here to talk about today. So,
yeah. Again, I appreciate the economic ties, to the natural resource, the coral reef system that we've got in South Florida. And I know, I'll give other folks an opportunity here. Sarah and Joanna have dedicated their entire professional careers, to this. So maybe one of you guys want to tackle that question.
Well, I'll just add, I agree completely with everything the Secretary just spoke to with regard to the value of our reefs in Florida. I'll even expand that. I would argue that these are a treasure nationally. I would argue that the Florida Reef Tract is as special as the Grand Canyon or Yellowstone or Yosemite. We don't have anything like this anywhere else in the continental US in our country. We don't have a backup. This is it. So it is extraordinarily important to Florida in all the ways the Secretary described in terms of our communities, our economy, resilience, coastal protection, and it is important to our nation. So that's all I would add.
Well, I would agree. It's certainly a national treasure. So I think we might just kind of to move on. I'm not trying to exclude anybody. I'm sure we're going to tag people along the way. But again, to your point, Sarah, I don't think people, we tied a dollar value to the ecology and the well-being of the reef, but I don't think people fully appreciate the scope and the scale of the system that we're talking about. And maybe Joanna, you could address that issue a bit.
Sure, absolutely. I'm going to ask Chelsea to throw up that great new logo that we have. So we actually have a new brand campaign for our Florida's Coral Reef, because we wanted to raise both Florida local awareness, but also that national awareness about the extent and all of those values that we just discussed. So all of Florida's Coral Reef, you might not have actually realized that it actually extends all the way up from the Dry Tortugas all the way through Martin County. That's 350 nautical miles of coral reef. most folks would only really know about the tourism impacts, but when we talk about those northern reefs, we're looking at the shoreline protection in billions of dollars. Not to mention, as the Secretary said, all of those recreational and commercial fishing opportunities. This reef is incredibly close to shore, especially up in the mainland, which is very different than other reefs in the US and the world, because it's located directly next to a really dense urban area. We have over 6 million people living here in Southeast Florida. That's a third of our state's population, which means that these reefs are really accessible for our community, not just Florida, but all of the tourists that come from the nation and the world. And so it really is, as Sarah was saying, this national treasure that allows people to really get out and access such a unique ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks, Joanna. I mean, again, you mentioned the fact that its proximity to shore, you know, it certainly increases or facilitates accessibility or access to the resource. And again, that's when I go to ICAST, I think about that. You know, access is such a big issue with all of the recreational users out there. But that proximity is good in some ways, right? It certainly promotes and facilitates some resilience, but it also comes with its own challenges. And I wonder if you might kind of talk to that a little bit.
Absolutely. So, yep, the second slide is up here now. And so looking across our entire ecosystem, all of those different uses means that we need to manage them in ways. It's a lot of people, and we want to make sure that that we don't love our reef to death. And so many of you may be familiar with things like the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, Dry Tortugas National Park, Biscayne National Park. Within the department, we have John Pennekamp Coral Reef State Park, which is the first ever underwater park that was established back in the 60s. And just most recently, the state established the new Coral Reef Ecosystem Conservation Area for the northern third of Florida's Coral Reef, north of Miami-Dade, north of that Biscayne National Park boundary, all the way up to Martin County. So it officially recognizes this entire system as unique and special and in need of conservation. Many of you might know that coral reefs globally are facing some pretty significant stressors. We've all heard about the thermal stress, increasing severity and frequency of these bleaching events associated with them. But here in South Florida, because we have that dense population living in direct proximity to the reefs, we also have a lot of local stressors. And those can be anything from anchor impacts and ship grounding impacts to coastal construction. Water quality has obviously been such a big part of this governor and administration's campaign to really look at the fact that the watershed system here in South Florida is one big system. That we ultimately, all that we do in the uplands through the urban area out onto the reefs, that is one big ecosystem, and it needs to be treated like that. And so we ultimately, all of those things combined mean that we have a lot of impacts, but we can also make a lot of difference quickly if we are able to address some of those really main driver stressors like water quality and physical impacts. We also, this ecosystem is so dependent on all of the nearshore seagrass and mangrove ecosystems as habitat for all of the critters that go out, especially the fish that go out and use these reefs ultimately in different stages of their life. That we kind of have to work on everything. There is no one silver bullet for helping our reefs, but we do know that we can make some really big impacts if we all work together doing it.
Yeah, again, thanks, Joanna, for all of those comments. And I would agree. I mean, what's really impressive when you step back and look what's going on with regard to coral reef restoration in this state, it's impressive to see the level of partnership and collaboration that's going on. It's been a pleasure certainly to work with everybody on this panel and others. But again, I think it might be a good time actually to shed some light on what we're actually doing, right, in the restoration arena, and what some of those partnerships look like. And either Noah or Joanna, you could start that again, and I'm sure you'll be able to touch base with Jim and Gil and Sarah.
Or I'll jump in sort of high level to begin with and say, and to me, again, it reflects why ICAST is such a great event, is in part, it's about fellowship, right? When it was in person, walking around the trade floor, you saw a fellowship between a wide variety of businesses and nonprofits and others who are here to support how important the recreational industry is, how important our natural resources are. And that's really fostered a tremendous partnership working on coral. And interestingly enough, and it's something we're trying to tap into more and learn more, but that's not always the case with natural resource issues. I think holistically with natural resources issues that we work on, they can be incredibly confrontational. They can be very difficult issues to get partners together and work on, in part because of how passionate every stakeholder is about the issue. But sometimes that can be a barrier and be problematic to moving forward with an issue. I'll comment for coral, this is one of the most functioning partnerships, really productive partnerships that allow us to move forward quickly. Certainly just on this webinar, you have FWCC, you've got Force Blue, you've got our federal partners, state, all together. But you've got everything from Moat Marine, the Florida Aquarium, a tremendous amount of academic partners all working together hand to hand to make sure we make progress to protect our reef, especially as it faces the disease outbreak it has for many years now. And I'll just comment, being in the room with institutions that are competing for money, that's not the question, right? I've seen Florida Aquarium, Moat Marine, and others talk about how do we make progress? How do we jointly apply for funding? How do we work together as a team? The question's about how we do more to protect this resource because of how critical it is for the environment. And that passion and support is really translated to a lot more support from the state of Florida. So if you look back 3-4 years ago, our funding presence specifically for disease intervention, work directly on the reef, and also specifically for resilience grants. Not that there aren't all sorts of things the state has done on resilience, but really funding resilience grants for sea level rise and other climate change issues. It used to be almost at zero. Where we stand this year, the governor secured record funding for these issues. We're at $22.5 million. So really in a short span of time, we went from essentially $0 to $22.5 million because of, I think in large part, what a great working partnership we have. And it matters when you hear the same message from everyone. It matters a lot to decision makers.
So I would agree with that. And again, I guess I'm going to try to organize this a little bit, and I'll probably go to Joanna to say more specifically about what the DEP is doing, and then again identify some of those specific partnerships that Noah alluded to.
Sure, absolutely. So through the Office of Resilience and Coastal Protection here in the Southeast, the department is focusing on both short-term actions to address some of these issues, as well as looking at that long-term goal. And we're moving forward together with our partners on many different multifaceted approaches to both of these short and long-term strategies. And so the main things that we as the department are focusing on this year, and I'm going to highlight some partnerships, and then I'm going to let our partners kind of speak to some of those examples. But the Secretary mentioned that we have this ongoing stony coral tissue loss disease outbreak that has really galvanized our community and our partnerships in a unified front, mainly because of how urgent and severe the situation is. But part of that is we're moving beyond this emergency role, and we need to think about the future in intervention, rescue, and restoration. We also need to maintain, the department feels very strongly that we need to maintain our stakeholder engagement so that our communities have a voice in what is going on in the management world with coral reefs. And part of that is the local stressor reduction, identifying those stressors working with the community to build consensus-based recommendations to agencies that manage the resources to ultimately reduce those stressors. And part of that is to be effective, we need to continue bringing people to the table and building more partnerships and looking at innovations, both in relationships and in technology. And so I'm gonna maybe start with Gil, if you wouldn't mind talking us through, you've been such a strong partner with all of us on the stony coral tissue loss disease response. If you wouldn't mind just sharing your perspective on all of that.
Sure, happy to do so. So I think some of you on this webinar are familiar with the challenges we faced since 2014 with the stony coral tissue loss disease. And just to say at the outset, coral diseases are notoriously complicated. Even if we did have an army of experts that knew everything there was to know about coral diseases, which we do not, they would still be very complicated. So we've had a number of diseases on our reef before, a number of bleaching events, but this one is very different for a couple main reasons. First of all, it differentially affected the large framework building corals, the star corals, the brain corals that made up the reef and have made up the reef for thousands of years. So immediately there was a concern that if these corals are differentially affected, the integrity of the reef itself might be in jeopardy. The second thing is that this disease progressed really fast, not only at the individual colony level, but also throughout the reef tract. And from 2014 till today, we have almost the entire reef tract affected by this disease. So for the last few years, we've been struggling just to try to keep up with the disease, not necessarily get ahead of it, but just to keep up with it. So as Joanna said, there's a number of partners in the dozens now, from state and federal government, academic sectors, critical nonprofit agencies like Jim's Group and Mote Marine Lab and Florida Aquarium, that have all come in to help us with this effort. They're working on various aspects, the obvious ones, including trying to figure out what this disease is and how we might be able to treat it. Even though we don't know what is causing the disease, we've made some significant progress with some treatment techniques that target specific types of pathogens. But as you expect, those treatment techniques are very labor intensive and difficult to apply over a scale as large as the entire reef tract. The area I want to highlight, though, is our efforts associated with what we call coral rescue. And this kind of pulls together a lot of the realities associated with this particular event. Pulling healthy live corals off the reef is something we would have never considered before 2014. However, we watched this disease progress down through the Keys, and by the time it got to a point between about Marathon and Key West, we had to make a very tough decision. We were very worried that we might lose a significant component of our genetic diversity, particularly for these large framework building corals that are responsible for building our reef and hopefully in the future rebuilding our reef. So we marshaled a bunch of partners and set up a plan to do a coral rescue, which is essentially going out ahead of the disease front, which, as I said, by the time we got to this, the disease was certainly past Marathon and on its way to Key West, which it has now overshot. We have a plan to pull as many colonies as we can of the 20 susceptible coral reef species out of the wild and house them in specialized facilities for three reasons. One is to prevent infection of those particular corals. The other is to preserve the genetic diversity that those corals maintain. And the third is to provide broodstock for propagation activities that we're ultimately going to have to ramp up significantly if we're going to do restoration on a scale that we believe is going to be required to restore our reefs. So in a nutshell, the goal was to pull in about 4,000 corals. Our goal was 200 unique genetic individuals for the 20 species, so that's 4,000 corals. To date, we're at about 1,800, and we're doing the genetic analyses on those corals right now. The diversity we pick up in those genetic analyses will tell us whether or not we can get away with less than the 4,000 we originally planned. But again, dozens of partners helping us do this. There is a coral rescue dashboard that is available to the public. It's linked off both the FWC site and the DEP site. And I think we'll be able to post a link somewhere to send you directly to it. But it's an effort that none of us ever wanted to engage in, but I think it's an effort that we're all very proud to be a part of, and it continues, and it just shows you how unique this particular response is, and it is, you know, concordant with the uniqueness of this disease and the threat to our reefs. So again, just a testament to the way people have come together to figure out how to tackle this tough issue.
And I know that Joanna's going to kind of navigate through some partners here, but I just, again, wanted to applaud those efforts, you know, and again, go back to those 3 points, particularly point 2 and 3. And, you know, point 2 is you're going to capture these corals and essentially create a genetic repository. And that's just so critical moving forward, you know, as you think about outplanting these corals in the future. Some corals, their genetic makeup will, you know, lead them to be more resistant to particular diseases moving forward. So it's absolutely essential that we do that. So I'm glad that you pointed that out for the folks listening on the call. So anyways, go ahead, Joanna. I didn't mean to like throw you off.
Not at all. Thanks. So part of that whole package of everything that we're doing together is also how do we even grow the industry to be able to restore at the scale that we're going to need in the future? We're talking hundreds, if not hundreds of millions of colonies will need to be restored to Florida's coral reef in the future. But we're still kind of cutting our teeth on building the technical and capacity, basically, to even create this brand new industry that will need to be formed around restoring Florida's coral reef. And so the state's funding that Noah mentioned earlier will be going to develop a lot of the plans and infrastructure that will be necessary to jumpstart that brand new industry. And our hope and our goal is that ultimately, as we build this industry over time, we're going to build the facilities as well as the technical capacity and the jobs. Really, this is a jobs creation engine that will ultimately also allow our communities to be a part in maybe volunteerism, in building the models that many of our NGO community partners have already created of engaging people in our community in this really incredible and just really urgent need to restore our reef. And so I think we're excited to embark on kind of setting the stage globally for what that looks like at a really large scale. I had mentioned previously that part of the department, our focus this year and always, is ensuring that the stakeholders have a voice in the management of Florida's coral reef, and the really big focus that we have on local stressor reduction. I mentioned earlier that there was the establishment of a new coral reef ecosystem conservation area for the northern third of Florida's coral reef. And that work is being done through the department's Coral Reef Conservation Program, along with their local stakeholder team called the Southeast Florida Coral Reef Initiative Team. And they're focusing specifically on Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, and Martin counties to bring together all of the different entities that have any interest in the reefs in the north there. And they have been working since 2004 to craft recommendations to agencies to identify and address local stressors. They are moving beyond into the kind of the next stage. When the ecosystem conservation area was formed, it was with the intent that there would eventually be a management plan for this area. And so the next step in this stakeholder engagement team and process is to move forward a coordinated reef management strategy that ensures there's a balance between the use and preservation of this incredibly important northern part of our reef. We also have a very similar process happening concurrently down in the Florida Keys, and I'm actually going to ask Sarah, who is our amazing superintendent for the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. The sanctuary is co-managed by the state, and so I am honored to be her co-manager and representing the state and ensuring that we have a holistic view in managing all of Florida's coral reef. But they've been in the middle of a multi-year stakeholder engagement process to look at the management plan, regulations, and zoning schemes down there. But part of that is also just making sure that the public has the ability, again, to have a voice in these resources. And there have been some really big issues that have come to the top. Water quality and coral restoration are really big parts of that. And so I'm also going to ask her to talk about the amazing new project that they launched along with all of us, which is Mission Iconic Reefs. And it's a targeted long-term restoration plan for the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. So Sarah, I'm going to just let you have it because I know you have so much that you have brought to this community, and we're so thrilled to have you.
You're very kind. Thank you, Joanna. Yeah, that's a lot to cover, but I'll start with the restoration blueprint, which is the large multi-year process that Joanna referenced that the sanctuary has been engaged with the state along with the community to try to basically re-examine how we're managing the Florida Keys, recognizing that we do have our challenges and we do have threats that are affecting the status and the health of these resources. We have to figure out what can we do about that to allow for us to continue to enjoy and use these resources well into the future. So many of the folks tuning into this panel, I suspect, are familiar with that process because it has been very public, very controversial. The Secretary mentioned many of these issues can be pretty tough, and people feel really strongly about that. I totally understand that. These are people's lives, their livelihoods. They depend upon these resources. They enjoy these resources. They've used them since they were wee ones, little kids. So we definitely want to make sure we're making smart decisions. We put out a series of alternatives. We took in a lot of public comment. What we've been doing during this pandemic, since we've been stuck at home, the staff has been going through all of the comments that we received through that process. We got a ton of input, taking all of that, synthesizing, and we are preparing to put out another proposal that reflects what we heard to address the issues that we're all facing. So stay tuned for more on that. There's a lot of information on that process, on the alternatives, on what we're considering, what we're trying to address on our website, floridakeys.noaa.gov. Ton of information, but stay tuned. We will be putting that back out for more public comment. So we really, really encourage people to use your voices and help us make smart choices going forward. But simultaneously, we're also, as Joanna noted, launching we launched in December, along with our partners in the state and many of the organizations that have been mentioned throughout this panel, a Mission Iconic Reefs. The concept here is to really take restoration at a handful of sites throughout the Keys to the next level. Restoration has really got its start, I would argue, in Florida, and now it's something people are doing all over the world. But we want to really learn from what has been done and take that to the next level. So we have identified 7 sites. I don't know if we can put up the map. Perhaps we can show a map of the 7 sites. Here we are. Thank you. These are the 7 sites in the Florida Keys that have been identified for restoration. As you can see, they're stretched throughout the entire Florida Keys, the idea being that we didn't want to put all of our eggs in one basket, so to speak. So we have developed really ambitious plans for restoration at those sites and are working with our partners here in the Keys to execute restoration of those sites. Now, it's ambitious, as I noted, and expensive. The first phase of this right now, by way of context, we think at some of these sites as little as 2% coral cover. And what we're hoping to get is close to 25% coral cover at these. So, it took us decades to get down to 2%. This is not going to happen overnight. And as I noted, it's not an inexpensive idea. Our goal over the next 5 to 10 years is to bring that up to 15% coral cover at these sites. And we think doing that would cost about $100 million. Not a small amount of money, but when you consider the value that the Secretary was noting at the beginning of this panel of what reefs bring to the state of Florida, in my opinion, a very, very wise investment. And so we are beginning to, nobody wrote us a check for $100 million yet. The state and NOAA and our partners are all fundraising to bring the money together for this. Over the next month, NOAA expects to announce another multi-million-dollar commitment to coral reef restoration. And Mr. Secretary, I didn't mean to say that's you, that's NOAA, the agency. So I wasn't expecting you to dig into your pocket for that. So this will be another multi-million-dollar investment to help go towards this, which is on top of a similar multi-million-dollar investment that NOAA made last year. So, and I know the state is identifying funds to support reefs, and again, the partners are. So we're excited about this. It's ambitious, but it's, I think, really important and necessary for us to do this, given the importance not only locally, but as I noted before, nationally, of this reefs in Florida. So I'll stop there. Thanks, Joanna.
Thanks, Sarah. And so last but not least, certainly not least, DP has been building some really, really amazing, and all of us have been reaching out beyond our normal kind of circle and really building these new and innovative partnerships with organizations that help us get the word out about Florida's coral reef. Jim with Forest Blue, actually, we met when we were up in Washington, D.C. as part of the U.S. Coral Reef Task Force meeting. He had come and given the task force a presentation, and I met him afterwards and I said, please come to Florida. You guys are incredibly inspiring. And so through their Florida Project Protect campaign, these inspiring combat veterans have dedicated the last 3 years here in Florida, almost 3 years, to field missions in conserving and restoring Florida's coral reef. Jim had already mentioned some of the partnerships that we had, kicking off with them coming and helping do some damage restoration after Hurricane Irma. But we also, as the department, hired them with Nova Southeastern University to work directly on intervention treatments for stony coral tissue loss disease, where they treated over 4,000 lesions on almost 2,000 corals, which is a tremendous effort. But most recently, and very exciting, and I'm not going to steal Jim's thunder here, but they had brought together all of our partners in the creation of a really amazing opportunity as part of Super Bowl that happened here in Miami. And I'm going to kick it to Jim to talk about this amazing opportunity and how it's building into the future and what Forest Blue's voice can do to help elevate all of the collective messaging.
Well, thanks, Joanna. I mean, it's a pretty humbling introduction, but I appreciate it. Now, at Forest Blue, I mean, I think we like to consider ourselves sort of force multipliers for all these operations that you've heard, you know, Noah and Sarah and Joanna and Gil talk about, not just as a really highly skilled workforce of men and women that we can put into the water alongside scientists to really improve the quality of the output, but in our ability to bring a microphone to Florida's coral reef in general and to all the issues surrounding it, you know, because so much of what we are about is returning servicemen and women to service, you know, and to help them use that mission and that service as a way to try to assimilate after, you know, what has been a 2 decades of combat overseas and whatnot, and some real struggles that our veterans have when they get back home and suddenly there's no more missions. So because we're so focused on that, we're able to attract a really unique audience that might not otherwise be engaged in things like coral reef conservation or restoration or preservation. I think one great example of that is the NFL. Last summer, and Joanna teed this up very nicely, last summer, the National Football League and the Miami Super Bowl host committee came to us and said, hey, it's the NFL centennial season, Super Bowl 54 is in Miami. We want to do something around coral. We don't know what, but maybe we could take 100 pieces of coral and transplant them, and that would be a great thing. And we could do it in celebration of our veterans and the centennial season and the Super Bowl. And we said, okay. So at Forest Blue, we put together a team with the University of Miami, Frost Museum of Science there in Miami, DEP. What was really interesting is some corporate partners that you don't traditionally think of in the coral conservation space, like Verizon, Pernod Ricard. They came on board, and we went out and we did it. We spent a day transplanting 100 pieces of staghorn coral right there in Biscayne Bay on Rainbow Reef, the Rainbow Reef site. Some of our viewers may be familiar with, and generated a lot of press. The NFL, the Super Bowl host committee were very happy, but we sort of sat back and said, wow, look at what we were able to do just for this small effort. What if we extended this to an entire football field, an entire ecosystem restoration of different types of coral, with different techniques? And this could really be a model, and it's a model that, in terms of funding and participation, that then Sarah and her team could use on the mission, on the 7 Iconic Reefs mission. So we went back to the NFL, and I was pleased, very proud of the fact that during Super Bowl week last year, with the help of the governor and DEP, Noah, you were there at the press conference, we unveiled this project, which is 100 Yards of Hope, which is this year-long football field-sized restoration project where we started. And I think what is so encouraging about this is, just on the light of what we were able to do, and our team was featured at the Super Bowl last year in Miami. And it's the unique circumstance of the Super Bowl happening to be in the state of Florida 2 years in a row. The NFL has now come back to us and said, look, we want to continue telling this story through Super Bowl 55 in Tampa. And it's just dumb luck that a lot of the coral we happen to be using to transplant, that is being raised and transplanted out on the site in Miami, is actually coming from the Florida Aquarium in Tampa. So you have this really interesting story across the state of Super Bowl moving from east to west, while the corals that are being used to restore the site are moving west to east. It's a connective tissue of both Super Bowls. And we've just had more and more partners, private sector partners, wanting to come on board and join in this effort. And it really is that. It's one thing to have state and federal governments on board, and that's important, and we need them. But to really mobilize corporations, other NGOs, private individuals, everybody together for this one collective effort to show what's possible. And that's really what it's all about. And telling the story through the context of Florida's coral reef about what we can still do, as Floridians, as Americans, as servicemen, as scientists, to come together to make a difference. So that's a long, I'm obviously very passionate about the project, but if anybody wants to, they can visit our website, which is forestblueteam.org, and you can read all about the project, see some videos, see what was shown on the Jumbotron at the Super Bowl last year. But it's just an amazing opportunity for everybody to rally around, Florida's coral reef on this particular effort and show what we can do going forward.
So again, I'm just going to just step in and say it's amazing all that's going on. Joanna really nice job kind of highlighting and all the partnerships. And again, there's so much innovation, so much effort, so much learning that's going on. I have to ask myself, really, is what are we doing with that, and how are we gauging kind of on the national level or the international level? And maybe that's a question for Noah. How are we taking this and sharing it with the rest of the world?
Sure, and I think it's something that we recognize we need to do more of. Joanna, myself, as well as FWCC, engage with the U.S. Coral Reef Task Force Actually, I think probably almost all this webinar engages with the U.S. Coral Reef Task Force as well as All Islands Reef Committee to really make sure we've got national coordination focus as well as creating international stage. I think that's something we have to do more. When you see the disease that we're facing here in Florida, it's not just in Florida anymore, it's throughout the Caribbean. When you look at the stressors that the reef system that we're facing, which is really America's reef system, it's similar to those stressors being faced around the world. And just the conversation, you know, having a group like Force Blue come on board, creating the partnerships we have, I think realize now more than ever, we've really got to do that at a scale that's across the world, right? That we don't have the luxury of sort of waiting. These problems are big. They are similar across countries, and that we really have to challenge ourselves to take the working framework we have here in Florida and make sure that we are really amplifying that by working across nations. Certainly, I'll put in a plug for reauthorization of the Coral Reef Conservation Act of 2000, just locally here. But this is something that I think you got to see this level of passion. You have to have a ICAST worth of excitement really move across nations. And so hopefully that's something we get to see in the near future.
Thanks, Noah. I really appreciate that. And it looks like Joanna might want to add something. I'm not sure, but if not, I'm going to ask her something else. So.
No, I definitely would. I would love to build on that because I think I just wanted to shout out that this is the 20th year of the for the National Coral Reef Conservation Act. It was established in 2000 and it's never been reauthorized. And so there is a really big momentum and wave of energy right now looking to create a reauthorization bill. The Restoring Resilient Reefs Act was introduced, and it will help drive that reauthorization that creates the funding that comes to us from the federal government, comes to the states and territories in the US to help us manage all of these issues that we've discussed and help drive these programs and restoration of these incredibly essential ecosystems for the US. It also will help create an emergency mechanism, so help us respond to things like coral disease outbreaks and bleaching events. And it allows us as the state to have a stronger local voice with our communities in how these resources are being managed, while still making sure that there is enough funding and capacity at the federal level to ensure the experts that are working across all of these locations are able to be with us at the table, putting all of our resources and pushing this all forward. So this legislation is really a game changer for us in Florida, but also the nation, and really will allow us to better respond and recover from things like this, the disease outbreak. So I just wanted to put a plug that this is a really big opportunity for us in the nation to reinvest in our nation's coral reef ecosystems.
Yeah, great. Thank you for mentioning that. And again, just to bring it back in a little bit, I mean, I'm thinking about what can we do, you know, locally, right, on a real granular scale to make a difference. And so I know there's so much going on there, but you might want to just let people know what those things are.
Sure. So I mentioned earlier that we have launched this brand new campaign, Florida's Coral Reef, and we have an awesome, amazing website with all kinds of information and resources. But the big thing that we're asking everyone to do, no matter who you are, is to go visit that website and take the Coral Crew Pledge. And it ultimately, this pledge is just saying that you recognize the value of this incredible resource to our state and nation, and that you're going to do some action, whatever that action is, that you're going to help raise awareness about Florida's coral reef, that you're going to try to reduce some of the local stressors that you might be playing a part in. Something like, you know, not touching or standing on the reef or anchoring on the reef, volunteering to join coastal or underwater cleanups, things like that, that we all can do very easily and be a part of making sure that we protect and restore this incredibly important ecosystem. One of the big things, though, is ask your friends and family to join you. We're really looking to get the word out, and And I can't underscore how important it is. We've got the time. We're all stuck at home, and we're looking for new and exciting opportunities to get invested in, and we're here for you. We've got 80 different partner organizations that are part of this campaign, and each one has an incredibly important story to tell about the piece of work that they're doing to help support all of the work that we're doing together. And so just wanted to throw it out there that the first 150 people that sign up after visiting the Florida's Coral Reef website are going to receive a special ICAST exclusive Coral Captain kit, which includes some mineral-based reef-friendly sunscreens, Florida Coral Reef decals, printed educational materials, and more. So have at it, go run and sign up quickly. We're going to put up the website, I think right there. Yep, we'll give you a head start in getting your Coral Captain kit.
Can I chime in on a couple of things people can do too that I'd encourage them?
Please.
So if you're coming down to the Florida Keys and you want to go fishing, we have a program called Blue Star Fishing Guides program. These are fishing guides that have committed to a higher level of sustainability in their operations. So I'd encourage you to look for a Blue Star operator to take you out on the water to go fishing. When you go out on the water, whether it's with a Blue Star operator on your boat, use our moorings. Those help us to avoid dropping anchors on the reefs. So that's something that people can do. We maintain over 500 mooring buoys throughout the Florida Keys. So tie up to that instead of dropping your anchor. And the last thing I'll say is we've got a boater education program. It's free, it's online. It's not a safety oriented class. It's more so that when you come to the Florida Keys, you can learn a little bit about the unique resources we have here and the issues. So you can get out there, enjoy these reefs, but do so smartly. So those are also a few things I'll add to the things that this audience can do to help us protect these important resources. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Sarah, for those additions. I mean, I certainly want to, we're getting close to the end of our time. I want to make sure that we have an opportunity for folks in the audience to ask some questions. But before I get there, I want to circle back just briefly on the broader issue of coastal resiliency and just ask the Secretary if he has any comments to offer there in the context of this discussion.
Sure, I would just briefly say, and sort of we may have passed over it before, and this is one of those things where I think you have the same impact of coral systems throughout the world, but how important they are for mitigating the energy of storms coming in and impacting our coastline. You know, when you look at studies showing that our coral reef systems, a healthy coral reef system, can reduce wave impact by up to 97%. When you see the impact on flooding for our coastline as far as storm surge and the impact that healthy coral reef systems have on that. You realize that when we talk about coral systems, you're not just talking about fisheries and recreational activity, but you're really talking about essentially green infrastructure that's critically important to us continuing the way we live in Florida. And you're going to see that throughout the world. And so that's, again, one of those things where that conversation is only now, I think, being had at larger levels and recognized, getting captured better today. And that's one of those things I'd hope that as we partner with countries around the world, really we can ramp up that conversation as to how important our coral reef systems are for resilience and adapting to climate change.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Noah. So at this point, I'm going to actually work through our facilitator here and see if we've got some questions that we might take a few minutes to try to address. Let's see where we would find those.
I see one of the questions was, what was the class that Sarah mentioned? So I'll jump in and answer that. It was a boater education class. I apologize for being so fast. It is online. It is free. You can find it on our website, floridakeys.noaa.gov. So you can find the boater education class there, and you can find out more about the Blue Star dive operators and fishing guides that will take you out in the Keys if you'd like to. So again, boater education class, it's free, floridakeys.noaa.gov.
Great, thanks. And I see a couple of questions. We'll start to scroll through. This one's actually for Gil, right? And the question has to do with the pandemic and how that might have affected the agency's efforts. you know, and as far as like collecting corals and putting them in the repository and such?
Well, yeah, it has certainly slowed us down. We had rescue cruises planned for March of this year that we didn't conduct. We took the time to figure out how they could be conducted safely. We worked with the vendor who runs a liveaboard that down in the Keys that we use, and we ultimately got to a point that we put in procedures both with our team and the vendor that were rigorous enough that we felt it was safe for our crews to go back out. So I'm happy to say we've done 2 cruises this year in the Dry Tortugas area, but not yet the park itself. And we were able to get a significant number of corals that help fill some of the species gaps we were missing associated with our rescue plan. So slowed us down, but we're back online, proceeding cautiously, as is everyone and everything they do these days.
Great, thanks, Gil. I mean, there's so many questions here. I'm going to try to get to a couple, and it's not intentional that I'm slighting anybody, but there's, you know, this is a question that I hear a lot, and maybe Joanna might be the best answer to this particular question. How close are we getting to identifying the cause of this stony coral tissue loss disease?
Oh, goodness. I wish I had a clean and easy answer for this. We've learned a lot, but we still have a lot to learn. Ultimately, our disease experts cautioned us that it could take potentially years to find the actual cause. Looking at human history, when we started first understanding what caused things like malaria, it took decades to understand what the pathogen was. Once you understand it, obviously you can move forward with treatments. We actually kind of just jump started that and started working on treatments that were effective. And so we, although we are still narrowing down and doing a lot of research to identify what the actual pathogen is, we jumped forward and started working on what the actual treatment is concurrently. And so I'm excited to say that we do have multiple working tools to intervene and treat the individual lesions. And we're working forward right now in field trials for a really exciting new treatment coming out of the Smithsonian that is using probiotics as a treatment to actually help create a healthy, balanced microorganism of a colony, on a colony. So yeah, we are going to continue that search for the pathogen, but we knew that we couldn't wait for it.
Yeah, again, thank you for those comments and insight there moving forward. So a lot of work still to be done, no doubt. I want to be really mindful of people's schedules and their time. It's just after 11 right now. So I would invite folks here real quick, if they have any parting words, we can do that, but don't feel obligated. And maybe I'll just start around the horn here, and I'll start out with Gil, and then I'll go to Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I appreciate you facilitating this panel and the folks who pulled it together and the folks who organized virtual ICAST. And again, we wish we were in the convention center looking at all the cool products with you, but maybe next year. So just a couple of key points. I mentioned earlier our rescue efforts, but I really want to highlight the fact that when we rescue corals, we need to take them somewhere. And the Association of Zoos and Aquariums has really stepped up. They have the expertise and the husbandry experts to keep these corals happy and healthy. And we now have Florida corals across the country in various zoos and aquaria, from New Jersey to Texas to Nebraska to Iowa. And ultimately, we hope those corals come back to Florida and they'll be the base of a scaled up propagation effort. So another example of partnerships that really needs to be acknowledged, especially since they're doing this largely on their own dime. And the second thing is, for the folks listening that are fishermen or involved in the business of fishing, keep in mind that the South Florida ecosystem is all connected. So when we talk coral reefs, we're also talking Everglades restoration. We're talking about efforts to improve coastal water quality in Southeast Florida. We're talking about efforts to minimize harmful discharges from Lake Okeechobee. A restored Everglades means a healthy Florida Bay, which means a healthy coral reef and a healthy coastal inshore system in Southeast Florida. So let's not forget that when we say these things, all of these efforts are interconnected, and it's good to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Gil. It's great to have you on the panel. Jim?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just close with something, share something we say on our team, which is, if not us, then who? If not here, then where? And if not now, then when? I think it's our statriotic and our patriotic duty to preserve and restore Florida's coral reef, not because, we should, but because we actually can. And I'll leave it with that.
Powerful words. Thanks, man. Sarah?
Well said, Jim. All I would add is I'm optimistic. I truly am. I know the challenges we're facing are daunting, but the capacity I have seen, the dedication, the commitment, the passion, it's all there. So I'm very optimistic. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. Joanna?
I'm going to echo everything that everyone just said. I think they did it very well, and just say thank you again. We need you. Everybody listening to this presentation, we need you to start getting engaged and helping us spread the word on all of this. We're so much stronger together, and it's only together that we'll be most effective in having Florida's coral reef in our future. Thank you.
Thanks. And again, thanks for being here. And Noah, I think I'll give you the final parting words.
Sure. Well, Joanna is always wise with her words, so I'll sort of repeat what she said, which is, again, ICAST is great because not only do you have amazing Florida companies and companies from around the world come and talk about great outdoor recreation, but every year the same companies talk about how they can make that resource better and really lead as a group of companies. My position, I've got a natural resource background, but really I spend my time leading and speaking about high level things. And if there's any one good thing you can do as a leader, it's really trying to create the priority and give attention to an issue. And so that's what I'd ask everyone on this call to do. The companies at ICAST, no matter who you are, go visit the website, floridascoralreef.org, and find out things you can do. If you're a business, challenge yourself to really highlight how important this is. Use your social media influence to bring attention to it. Create a matching donation campaign. Reach out to us. If you're in the media, get the word out. Talk about the coral reef system that really is a national treasure that not enough people know about, and help support the work that you've got such a broad group of folks working on. But really, I'd say it's the taking the leadership to make sure everyone understands this has to be a priority through the state and through the world.
All right. Well, again, thank you. Thank everybody on the panel. Thank everybody out there for participating. It's, again, a really, really important topic, and I'm glad that we had some time to share our thoughts about it today. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the virtual ICAST experience, and hopefully we'll get to see you in person next year.
Yeah.
All right. Take care. Thanks again, guys.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye now.